Ben Shapiro taking over Turning Point. Is this for real? What is going on? I don't know, but I don't like it. Very uncomfortable to think if he is, and all what has been said is all true. I really don't speak or make live videos, but I do have some things to say about this. You will be asking yourself the same after watching the montage of interviews. There was a lot more I could have added that I had been saving. Like I said, what they saying that I came across with something to watch and follow. I did follow all of them back when they started to rise, but had to step away because it was too much. And sometimes I did disagree with what they were saying, but sometimes they were spot on with topics. Even Charlie, I didn't get him sometimes, but I still found myself watching his debates and seeing his point respecting. That was his choice and my choice to feel the way we did on topics. Even to disagree, that was okay. He made it okay to agree to disagree, but at least we were able to talk about it and communicate. The dialogue him and everyone who got up to that mic with him was something bigger than any of us could explain. And now that he is gone, it's not a matter of right and left and we should be out in the street destroying everything. I think a lot are still in shock. No matter if you were some crazy liberals or hard-leaning right-wing, he listened to you and heard you. This caught me attention last month when I came across TikToks from Megyn Kelly and Candace Owens, then started seeing Tucker's interviews with Congress members about this. Megyn was talking about being threatened by her view on a certain country's government. Candace even backed this in a podcast telling Megyn to watch out because they did it to her. Looking back, they did the same to Tucker when he started to question. I did not know Charlie was having the same going on with him and his questions on this country's government. And then take into account what just happened, because Charlie's voice and platform was way bigger than the other three combined. Charlie had a way of changing people's minds and making people listen. Seeing that in all the chaos, we had common ground most times. He became a threat. Just watch Ben Shapiro face in that interview.
Is this right here supposed to be some kind of joke? So Erica comes out saying that Turning Point is not ending, and then Shapiro comes out and says that he's going to continue carrying that torch, carrying that bloodstained microphone. After I explain this to you in detail and show you, I assure you that you'll be peed off. Watch this right here for just a moment. This is what Shapiro said on Rogan's show.
Prophet and
No. We don't believe he was a prophet.
what do you think he was? What do you?
What do I think he was historically? I think he was a Jew who tried to lead a revolt against the Romans and got killed for his trouble, just like a lot of other Jews at that time who were crucified for trying to lead revolts against them.
He said Jesus was a troublemaker and that he deserved his punishment, basically, right? Just wait.
Because we're Americans, and we're not going to be deterred. Charlie's voice is not silent. We're going to pick up that bloodstained microphone where Charlie left it.
Confused? Let me explain to you. He's going to be going to college campuses in the name of Turning Point. That sounds okay to you? Really? The Bible says in 1 John 22 that any single person who does not claim that Jesus is the Christ that came from the Father, that they are anti-Christ. I'm gonna hold my tongue right here, but I don't believe they have a choice.
I gotta be careful the way I say this. They're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. I mean, I don't use that term lightly, okay? They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people from there, okay? And honestly, they have a mandate to go seek justice and revenge. They do. This idea that they need to have a truce or a peace treaty, that's morally, after you see women and children be burned alive and dragged to the streets.
Unconditional surrender. Is that what Israel is aiming for here? I suppose that is a question that I get a lot on campus. What does success look like? Because I think we could all agree a long war is not good for Israel, a long, drawn-out war, and we're coming towards 2 years in about a month, so it's been about 23 months. So what does ultimate success look like in the Gaza Strip?
Now, my main critique of the Netanyahu administration in Israel and the Netanyahu government is they didn't move faster. I think this should have been a much more accelerated process. Israel set out at the beginning of this war with two goals, as articulated by the Israeli government. Goal number one was to get as many hostages out as humanly possible to free the hostages. And second was to win the war. In many ways, those are mutually exclusive goals, because if you actually wish to win the war, then you have to do things militarily that are going to involve actual movement on the ground. And meanwhile, Hamas is attempting to basically use the hostages as its own form of human shields. They've used their own civilians as human shields. They're also using the hostages as a form of human shield. And so as you came to the end of the war, this was always going to be the question, is how the war kind of came to its final terminus. The priorities that Netanyahu has laid out publicly include essentially, basically, it's let the hostages out, and there can't be a future military threat to Israel. Those are, if you had to sum it all up, those are the two things. How that materializes, in my opinion, is likely to be an Israeli military occupation of large swaths of the Gaza Strip, the setting up of humanitarian areas, particularly on the coast and in Rafah, in which humanitarian aid is provided, a pathway out for people who actually want to leave. This is the only conflict of which I'm aware on planet Earth in which there are outside countries telling people who would like to leave that they literally cannot. The Trump administration has been trying to facilitate the ability of people who want to leave to do so, and has also been trying to facilitate the entry of not only humanitarian aid, but investment into the areas that have been cleared of terrorists. And then you can see some sort of Hamas-free rebuilding. That would be the goal of the end of the war. Now, my understanding is that the sort of last untouched area of the Gaza Strip, in terms of Israeli serious military operations, is Gaza City. It's why there's been so much focus on Gaza City. Last I heard, Israel already controls something 40 to 50% of the territory in Gaza City. They've been warning people to get out for at least a couple of weeks now. Hamas has been stopping people at checkpoints and turning them back and shooting them if they don't stay in the city to be used as human shields by Hamas. So that's the current situation on the ground.
What other feedback or criticism would you have about this situation? I know that it's impossible for anyone to listen to everything that you ever say, but looking at this from an American perspective, what else would you say things could have been handled differently? Maybe on the PR front, maybe also just on a conduct front. Where would you say, as an outsider, things that could have been handled better, more efficiently, or with more precision?
So number one, there's no such thing as a perfect war. So obviously in any war, there are going to be things that happen that are ugly and that are terrible. And that is why war is a terrible thing. As far as a sort of operational front, again, I've spent an awful lot of time in Israel. I've watched tape of operations happening, drone operations. I've met with an enormous number of Israeli soldiers, young men and women, people who are 18, 19, 20 years old, who have had legitimately their limbs blown off going house to house in an area where they didn't have to. The charge that Israel has been indiscriminate in its use of force in the Gaza Strip is an absurdity on its face. Israel has complete air superiority over the Gaza Strip. If it wanted to level the place and turn it into a parking lot October 8th, it certainly had the military capacity to do so. It has not done that. Instead, it has sacrificed legitimately 1,000 of its own young men, particularly in these areas, and thousands more who are wounded for the rest of their lives, going house to house in an attempt to prevent all that, and is currently shipping in 4,400 calories per day per person into the Gaza Strip, much of which is then stolen by Hamas. So that is not to say that any war is perfect. This war has been conducted in about as meticulous way as any urban war in history. Just because war is ugly doesn't mean that it's being fought wrongly. And I think that the main mistake that Israel has made is misunderstanding how public relations works, in the sense that they couldn't have presented this war in a better, kinder way that people would have loved. What they could have done is move faster. And the reality is that the American way of doing war is to win as fast as possible. And we don't like long, drawn-out occupations. We don't like long, drawn-out military operations. That's true in Iraq. It's true in Afghanistan. It's true in Ukraine. It's true in the Gaza Strip. And so the kind of things that we Americans like to see are, for example, the operations against Hezbollah that took about 3 weeks to 5 weeks, or the operation against Iran, which took about 12 days, right? Those are operations that any ally of the United States can sustain. Long operations like the one that Israel has been performing in the Gaza Strip are inherently very, very difficult from PR level. And I'm not sure, to be frank, that there is a way for Israel to, quote unquote, win the PR war in the middle of a very long war against an intransigent terrorist enemy that legitimately embeds itself in the most damaging places.
A claim I receive often, and we're starting our campus tour tomorrow, is that Israel is committing genocide. How do you respond to that, Ben?
There is literally no definition of genocide by which Israel is committing a genocide. Typically, a genocide involves the targeted killing of the vast majority of the population, or at least an attempt to do so. There has never been a genocide attempted in world history in which the food that was being shipped in was more than the daily caloric intake of the average American into the areas where you're supposedly attempting to genocide the population. The total population loss in the Gaza Strip thus far has been 3%. During the Holocaust, just to take a reference, it was 50%. During Rwanda, it was significantly higher than 3%. You don't issue leaflet warnings to people. You don't go house to house in a genocide in an attempt to reduce civilian casualties. I understand that people use genocide at this point to just mean thing I don't like. And I get that. I understand. Nobody likes war. Nobody wants war. Certainly not the Israelis, who are not at war on October 6th. The fact is that every Israeli family has to send their 18-year-old son or daughter off to the military with the possibility that they're going to get blown up in Gaza. That is not something that any Israeli wants, right, left, or center. The real question is whether the accusations are accurate. They certainly are not, again, by any stretch of the imagination.
Ben Shapiro, author of Lions and Scavengers. We're going to get to that in a second. I have one or two other questions on Israel. I think it's very important for our audience to hear this, though, because there is an incessant campaign. And one thing a friend sent to me, interestingly, which is, okay, Charlie, we've pushed back against the media on COVID, on lockdowns, on Ukraine, on the border, on so like maybe we should also ask a question: is the media totally presenting the truth when it comes to Israel? Just a question, that maybe we shouldn't believe everything the media says, because I know I've been conditioned to ask a lot more critical questions over the last couple of years. So Ben, some people would accuse Israel of wanting to ethnically cleanse. Some people in the Israeli government are saying, again, it's all over the place, right? You have opinions all over. In your opinion, what would a good outcome 5 years from now be, and how does one respond to the claims of ethnic cleansing?
So ethnic cleansing, the idea, presumably, that population movement is equivalent to ethnic cleansing. I think ethnic cleansing is a term that's been fairly recently coined to describe population movement during war. And the reality is that's been ongoing for literally all of human history. The idea that Israel is, quote unquote, forcing people out of the Gaza Strip, that is not the stated policy of the Israeli government. The idea is if people want to leave, they can, but they're not being forced to leave. Again, moving people out of heavily urbanized areas that are honeycombed with terrorist booby traps pretty much everywhere is not the same thing as, quote unquote, ethnic cleansing. And I think that ethnic cleansing is very often used as sort of a softer form of the genocide attack. The idea being that Israel is trying to kill everyone, which of course is not true. As far as your earlier question about what we believe from the media, one of the things that I find kind of astonishing in some of the folks on the right who are highly critical of Israel is actually the lack of the lack of skepticism when it comes to legacy media. Legacy media are radically anti-Israel overall. The New York Times can certainly not be accused of being a pro-Israel outlet. It'd be very difficult to make the accusation that the Associated Press, which has worked hand in glove with Hamas for years, or Reuters, that these are wildly pro-Israel outlets, and yet when it comes to the reporting, it seems to be sort of the opposite.
Ben,
so the perception the legacy media is like owned by the Jews. And
I was going to say, Ben, come
on.
You Jews own the media, Ben. So, I mean, come on. As you could tell by all the wonderful headlines you guys get.
Well, I mean, dude, the accusation that we own the media has not prevented, the Daily Wire from employing people who radically disagree with me on all of these matters. I mean, I don't agree with Matt Walsh on foreign policy. Matt obviously is a major host over at Daily Wire, and that's just my shop. And I'm overtly pro-Israel. Right? I mean, I'm not making any bones about this. I'm a Jew and I'm a Zionist. I'm not going to pretend that to say otherwise would be absolutely silly. To suggest that some sort of atheistic Jewish person by birth who does not care about Judaism or Israel owning the New York Times means the New York Times is pro-Israel is to ignore literally every bit of coverage they have ever done for my entire lifetime.
We're running out of time here, but just last question on this, Ben. I know this might be a tougher question, but Bibi said, quote, I didn't like he said this, I'll be honest. You can't be MAGA if you're anti-Israel. I don't like it for a couple reasons. How did you analyze that statement from Bibi?
I mean, and I think that there is the ungenerous way of interpreting that and then the generous way of interpreting that. So the ungenerous way is to suggest that you have to hold a particular position on every Israeli governmental activity in order to be MAGA. Which, of course, is not true. I mean, you can disagree from the right or from the left with Bibi's policies, and you can still be plenty MAGA. I think the idea that Bibi is putting out there is that if you are taking Hamas's side against Israel in a conflict, it is very difficult to align that with the stated positions of the Trump administration or what President Trump himself is doing right now. I certainly is true.
You cannot look. I think you can have disagreements on Israel and still be MAGA. Obviously, you should be America first. But if you're pro Hamas, you're something darker. And we shouldn't put up with that. Ben, tell us about your important new book.
So the basic idea in Lions and Scavengers is that
when I had made up my mind about Israel, that Charlie and me fell apart. Nope, never, not for a second. I said, it's the easiest decision ever because Charlie knew who I was and I knew who he was. I said, Charlie, this is where I'm at and there's no room for movement. And you tell your whoever that needs to hear it, whatever you need to tell them, because we're always going to be brothers and sisters, We're always going to be brother and sister. And we would talk about things and debate things behind the scenes. And I think my perspective was as it's been throughout our relationship. You might not get it now, Charlie, but you will. I'm only a few years older than you, but I think you're gonna see things my way. And I think in the end, Charlie was going through a spiritual transformation. I don't think it, I know it. He was going through a lot, and There was a lot of pressure, and it's hard for me to watch the people who were pressuring him, I don't know, just say the things that they're saying. You know, there's something about it that just feels really fake to me. And they would have allowed him to lose and wanted him to lose everything for changing or even slightly modifying an opinion, and then to see them doing what they're doing today, it's hurtful to me. It's very hurtful to me.
And I have to tell you, I find it very irritating because I do feel like some of us have earned the right to have some credibility on the subject of Israel and don't want to be called those names when we have some mild pushback on some of the overreaches, whether it's, you know, whether they're winning or losing the propaganda war right now. And my contention is they've begun to lose it. And I realize it's propaganda coming at us from Hamas, but their numbers have turned. Here in America, they've turned, not so much with Republicans, a little bit with Republicans, but completely with the Democrat Party and with independents. They have shifted mightily from at least double digits highs to single digit lows now with when it comes to approval. And also with respect to, you and I speculated about this at the Turning Point event, whether the possibility of Jeffrey Epstein possibly being a Mossad agent or asset or affiliated with, that's been turned around on me too, to you must be anti-Semitic. What the hell? That's such bullshit. The same people who say you can criticize Israel, that's fine, we won't call you anti-Semitic if you criticize Israel, now turn around immediately and say you're anti-Semitic for even raising that. I completely reject that. And I raise this as a pushback against my friends on that particular strain of the aisle to watch it, because you don't want to alienate people who are openly your friends by going nuts in your crackdowns on mild pushback on anything related to Israel.
And I will say this, the behavior by a lot, both privately and publicly, are pushing people like you and me away. Not like we're going to be pro-Hamas, not like we're going to, but we're like, honestly, the way you are treating me is so repulsive. I have text messages, Megan, calling me an anti-Semite. I am learning biblical Hebrew and writing a book on the Shabbat. I honor the Shabbat, literally the Jewish Sabbath. I visit Israel and fight for it. And there's another article out in the Times of Israel today. I could read it on air. I was just reading before I got on. Charlie, what are you doing? Like, why are you, what am I doing? I'm sorry. Like, let's just take a step back here. Like, I'm an American citizen. Yes, I want Israel to win. Yes, I'm a Christian. But like some of the mess, and you've seen how I've been treated, Megan, by some, not all, by some.
No, it's very irritating.
It's
been so unfair. They were coming after you after Turning Point for, among other things, that you had Dave Smith there. Dave Smith is allowed to criticize Israel. You had both sides. The Israeli side was overrepresented.
Though. No, you're not allowed to. It's even worse than that. Again, I just want to repeat for the 5th time. I love Israel. I want Israel to win. But my moral character is now being put into question, Megan. Not my decisions. Not like, hey, are you doing this? Is it smart or is it dumb? But no, I am a bad person if I do this. And I could go, I mean, you saw it, Megan. It was trending on Twitter, thousands of tweets and text messages. And if I were to be charitable and generous, I will say the people that are attacking me are in a hyper paranoid state, because they're at war, and war tends to make things black and white, and you're a hammer looking for a nail. So I'm trying to be charitable, Megan. Literally, I'm trying to cut as much slack as I can, right? Like, okay, what would it be like if all of a sudden I'm starting to see a pattern of behavior similar to what my grandparents saw in 1930s Germany online?
But I am sick of being lectured on, like, you have to see it exactly as we see it and support everything, or you're against us.
So this is so important, Megan. And again, I don't want, you cannot say everyone in the pro-Israel, and I don't say it, acts that way. But I got text about you, Megan, saying, why is Megan like doing the bidding of Hamas? I was like, what are you talking about? Megan's the best. Like, what? Like, she's amazing. And I said, why are you texting me about Megan? And I at that point, and so this is what they don't understand. You and I, Megan, and Tucker is in the same category, and they've tried to go after Tucker.
Yeah.
Is that the more you attack our moral character, the more we're going to double down in a direction, because screw you,
100%.
I don't do it that way, okay?
Right.
Like tell me I'm wrong. Cool. Tell me if I've got my facts wrong. By the way, on the Epstein thing, Naftali Bennett says he wasn't an Epstein agent. We have to be pursuers of truth. They've denied it. Fine. Let's keep digging. Okay, fine. But the thing that I think is being lost is like on some part of the population, you can scold them into silence, right? But if I have any deviation of a purity test, any deviation whatsoever, such as hosting a focus group, right, Megan, with a bunch of our students that went viral, having Dave Smith or Tucker at my event, it is all of a sudden, oh, Charlie is he's no longer with us and all that. I said, wait a second, what do you mean? What does with us mean exactly, right? I'm an American, okay? Like, I represent this country, and I don't even understand that paradigm. But at the same time, simultaneously, when the hostile reaction is that now Meghan and Charlie are enemies,
right?
Boy, I'll tell you, like you're not gonna, I won't say lose, but you will weaken and just basically deflate two of your strongest advocates if that continues.
Candace Owens just exposed that Israel's Netanyahu lied about the letter that Charlie Kirk wrote to him. Last night, one day after the tragedy, Netanyahu booked himself a primetime slot on U.S. national television to read a letter from Charlie Kirk about how much Charlie loved Israel. Except that's not what the letter said, according to Candace Owens, who is a very close friend of Charlie Kirk. So now she's coming out and saying Netanyahu needs to release that full letter. Let Charlie speak for himself. Don't put fake words in his mouth. And oh, by the way, why are you lying about this? You're the leader of a nation who's at war with 7 countries halfway across the world, and you're booking a prime time slot on US TV airwaves to come and lie about Charlie one day after this tragedy? What is going on here? Not to mention, Candace also added that yes, Charlie was at war with his donors over the question of Israel and the war in Iran. So this was really heating up. Things were really bad. Charlie was fearing for his life, and now you got this. What is going on? Do not listen to people who say stop asking questions, because they do not have your best interests at heart. They definitely don't have Charlie's best interests at heart, and they don't want you to find out the truth.
He was one of the only people, I mean, truly one of the only people to go to the president whom he loved. He loved Donald Trump, like personally as well. And I think the president really loved him in a real way. But he was one of the only people to go to the Oval Office and say, sir, I totally understand and think Iran's really bad, but a war with Iran is not, you know, is something that could really hurt our country. I mean, boy, that was an unpopular position. He didn't need to express it. Oh, of course. And he did it again. He didn't have some weird agenda. He wasn't mad at anybody. He was for his country, and he was for doing the right and wise and difficult thing. And he said that. He went to the Oval Office to say that. He took massive abuse from his own donors, which is also something that you don't see people. And he loved his donors. It wasn't a hostile thing, but they had a different view. A lot of them, not all, but a lot. And they expressed it to him in a very intense way. I know because he showed me. And he said, look, I understand your perspective. This is my perspective, and we're going to do what we think is the right thing, the wise thing.
In that way, too, he was the voice of young people. I mean, there are no young people in the country anymore supporting this war and wanting Israel to continue its bombing campaign. That's just the truth. Look at the polls. And he was in touch with them. And even where his own opinion may have differed from their opinion, he felt like he owed it to them to bring their message to the sitting president of the United States. I mean, it was, that's what's been snuffed out.
Well, as he has been, unfortunately.